Let us first look at this picture. It's representative of a typical picture that shows up on Google when I searched masculine versus feminine traits. Although each picture differs slightly, there are many traits that are repeated between them, and I'm sure we've all grown up with an awareness that certain traits are seen as more feminine whilst others are more masculine. Although there's a mix of positive and negative traits for each gender here, I would say that the general consensus of society, until some shifts in the recent decade at least, has been one of deeming masculine traits as superior. I grew up with these values. I grew up believing that there is a binary distinction between masculine versus feminine traits, and I grew up believing that masculine traits are better. I grew up being told by adults around me that I possess a higher proportion of masculine traits compared to the typical girl. And I was told that it's a good thing, it's something to be proud of, a sort of variation on the I'm not like other girls psychology. Today, as I look back, I would say that they were correct in saying that I had more conventionally masculine traits. However, what I see now is that there is no need to label those traits as masculine, and there's no need to see these traits as innately superior. They are simply traits that have a higher tendency of appearing in the male sex throughout human history. And these traits would orient you towards certain paths in life rather than others. Hence, in this video, I wish to explore how the traditional divide between masculinity and femininity came about, why masculine traits were seen as inherently superior, and how we should adjust our views on this binary as we go forth. I will not participate extensively in the nature versus nurture debate here. So for the premise of this video, I would say perhaps both play significant parts in a child's upbringing and consequently in shaping that person's psychology or personality traits. Without denying the possibility that there are definitely genetic factors which make certain traits more likely to appear in one sex over the other, we must equally acknowledge the role of environmental upbringing in fostering these gender stereotypes. And it is this latter factor that I want to discuss in detail. The first question would be, why are certain traits associated with masculinity rather than femininity in our society? We must note that for the majority of human history, the gender roles have been quite fixed, so the man is the breadwinner and the woman is the domestic caretaker. Hence, it is natural to assume that the traits of each gender are related to the typical job that they're usually expected to undertake. So if you have a child, you would most naturally want to raise him or her with traits that would guarantee him or her the highest chances of success in the expected role of their gender. So I would say that men and women have competed against each other in two completely separate racetracks of life. That is how I choose to call them. Masculine traits set up people for success in the male racetrack. Feminine traits set up people for success in the female racetrack. So what are the two racetracks then? Well, I would say the male racetrack is the world and the female racetrack is more confined to the domestic sphere. Men compete with each other for power and wealth, whereas women compete with each other for, well, men. Social history has defined male success as one of securing power and wealth, and success for women means securing a man that embodies male success. Hence, we see that men and women are fundamentally pursuing different things because that was what they've been told to pursue since birth. And of course, success in these two complete different fields would demand different skill sets. Now, if we refer back to the list, we can easily understand how typical traits of each sex can set them up for success in their respective fields. If a woman is dependent, emotional, caring, and passive, she makes an attractive wife. Contrarily, if a man is independent, competitive, brave, and assertive, he is more likely to succeed in the world. So when parents bring up their children and say, well, girls should be like this, boys should be like that, they are really trying to help their child attain the best possible chances of success in their racetracks for life, in a sense. Yes, this reinforces gender stereotypes, but for the majority of history, parents really have done it with good intentions. It's the formula for success. There is a simple fashion that this question can be answered. Well, the simple answer is we live in a patriarchal society. Men have higher social status. Of course, masculine traits are seen as superior. However, there's also the more nuanced version to this answer. Remember how I say that masculine traits set people up in terms of worldly success, i.e., making them more likely to attain wealth and power in this cutthroat competition. Following the progression of gender equality, women are increasingly thrown into the traditionally masculine racetrack, i.e., we're forced to compete with men in terms of worldly success. Now, if the women entering this racetrack still carry mainly feminine traits, their traits are clearly less suited to success in this racetrack. I'm not making a definitive judgment. Of course, all traits can play into people's success in attaining wealth and status. But for the majority of the cases, I would say the masculine traits give people a better chance of success. So when women enter the male racetrack but with feminine traits, they're naturally less competitive. And in fact, this has been reflected by a lot of social studies that shown that women are more risk perverse. They tend to undersell themselves, whereas men tend to oversell themselves when applying for jobs. They're less likely to ask for promotions, etc. And these are all stemming from the fact that the masculine traits are the ones that can push people higher up on the career ladder. So when both sexes are competing in the same track, and we see that masculine traits bring better chances of success in this racetrack, of course people are going to view these traits as superior. I just wanted to note that although these traits were traditionally considered to be masculine, there is no reason why women cannot acquire these traits. And in fact, a lot of women who are successful in their career have adopted the traits that we see as traditionally masculine, and in a sense it is good because we are breaking the dichotomy and we're just seeing these as traits that serve people well when they are really oriented to advance in their careers. So if I apply this analysis to understanding a lot of the gendered remarks I've been given by adults in my upbringing, I would say that they have adopted to a large extent the progressive view that both genders should compete in the same racetrack. However, they're still not as accustomed to understanding traits without the male-female binary. Now I wish to explore a very related concept called written by a woman. An Urban Dictionary defines it as the phrase written by a woman is mostly applied to men who are literally God sent. They're respectful, handsome, and wonderful in any way. These type of men are the most beautiful beings that exist. I've also watched a video by another YouTuber, Amanda Mariana, on this topic, where she questioned whether these are just men doing the bare minimum to please their female partner, and I would like to quote this excerpt briefly from her.
Lori and Darcy are very different characters, but what seems to make them so beloved by the written by a woman trend is the fact that they simply respected their female love interests, so much so that they listened to their perspectives and changed themselves to be with them.
Now notice how key traits of men written by women includes respecting their female partner and changing himself in order to suit her wishes and goals. Doesn't this sound suspiciously like what women have been doing throughout the entire history for their male partners? So I would say men written by a woman are men who exhibit conventionally feminine traits. These traits set people up for success in the domestic sphere. Or to put it in a more straightforward way, it makes them more attractive personalities on the spouse-seeking market. Women have always had a higher tendency of possessing these traits because the spouse market is their racetrack. Being competitive on this market was what enabled most women to make their living. In other words, women know better than men how to make a partner happy, because this has always been the biggest task in their upbringing and life training. It's as simple as that. This difference in what women and men train themselves on is also reflected in the fact that women typically take more care to make their appearances attractive. This is because physical looks play a much bigger part in women's assortment of assets that can be used to attract the opposite sex, whereas for men, their wealth and power tend to play a bigger part. A lot of people like to say that gay men, by nature of being gay, have a lot more feminine traits. I think this is a misconception. Rather, we should just say they simply have more traits that enables a romantic relationship to work. In a heterosexual relationship, it's usually the woman who possesses these traits and the woman who puts in the most effort to make this relationship work. But when we see a relationship between two men, well, of course, at least one of them has to possess these traits, right? Otherwise, the relationship just wouldn't work at all. This is probably why a lot of gay men are perceived as possessing a large amount of feminine traits. Now let's go back to the original question. What does it mean, fundamentally, for a man to be written by a woman? I would say it means that this man possesses a large amount of traits that serve the purpose of pleasing a partner. And these traits have traditionally been seen as feminine. Hence, when we see a male character possessing these traits, we often think, oh, the female author is creating an unrealistic character. Because, well, most men in real life are just not like this. However, given that the barrier between two gendered racetracks is in the process of breaking down, and it has already largely broken down in terms of women are moving into the male racetrack, why should we not demand men try and adopt some conventionally female traits in order to compete in the traditionally female racetrack? I think it's inevitable that more and more men have to do so. If women can attain a living without having to rely on a man, the need to marry for socioeconomic reasons would disappear. Hence, men need to make themselves more competitive in the spouse-seeking market in order to find a spouse, really. I think it's just the reality of the situation.
As I'm editing, I realize I'm speaking of the spouse-seeking market as if it's composed completely of heterosexual relationships, and I would like to clarify that of course this is not the case, and I'm not saying this should be the case, but it's just that I'm focusing on using heterosexual relationships in order to prove my point, since the topic of my discussion is the binary between male and female.
So I think we shouldn't call these men written by a woman. We should simply acknowledge them as the more attractive partner choices. I think the binary of masculine versus feminine personality traits should be broken down as we push towards gender equality. It is really a two-way interaction. The breaking down of such binary helps push for gender equality, and the progress towards gender equality means that we must break down these stereotypes inevitably. For example, a simple way of pushing for this change would be to readjust our understanding of the concept of men written by a woman in the way that I have just discussed earlier. So this is all I have to say on this topic, and I would really love to hear any of your thoughts in this area. If you like this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe.